Imagine working 80 hours a week for 5 straight years on a medical breakthrough.
Right, just grueling, endless hours.
Exactly. You are sleeping in the lab, skipping holidays with your family. You're pouring your entire soul into a project that could fundamentally change how we treat a major disease.
Yeah.
Now imagine the morning before that research is finally submitted for publication. Your boss casually deletes your name from the author list.
Oh, wow. Just erases you completely.
Just erases you. He puts his own name first, maybe gives the co-author credit to a friend who didn't even work on the project at all.
Which is devastating.
Right. And when you try to protest, he calmly reminds you that your visa is tied to this specific lab.
The ultimate leverage.
Yeah, he tells you if you make a fuss, he makes one phone call, and you were deported by the end of the month. You lose the research, you lose your career, and you lose your entire life in this country.
It's terrifying. And the worst part is, it happens.
So let's unpack this today, because that scenario, it isn't from some corporate espionage thriller. That is the hidden reality happening right now in the halls of some of the most prestigious higher education institutions in the world.
It really shatters the illusion we have about academia, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
I mean, we inherently want to believe that universities are these pure, elevated spaces.
Right, like ivory towers.
Exactly. We think of them as the ultimate meritocracies, places where, brilliant minds gather solely to pursue truth, challenge orthodoxy, and solve humanity's greatest problems.
But that's not exactly the whole picture.
No, it's not. What Dr. Jonathan H. Westover reveals in his comprehensive analysis on this subject, which is what we are digging into today for our deep dive, is a massive structural crisis.
Right.
It turns out that the very institutions designed to teach us how to think ethically and critically are actually operating as breeding grounds for conformity, silence, and outright exploitation in a shocking number of cases.
And traditionally, the academic world just refuses to look at this systemically, right? Like they treat it as an individual problem.
Oh, absolutely. If a star professor screams at a graduate student until they quit, or, sabotages a junior colleague's grant application out of pure jealousy, the university typically shrugs it off.
They just call it a personality clash.
Right, an interpersonal conflict, just a bad apple, a quirky genius with a bad temper.
A quirky genius. That's always the HR defense, it seems.
Yeah, but Dr. Westover's research, which pulls from a really massive body of empirical data, argues something entirely different.
And what's the core argument there?
He says this isn't a bad apple problem. This is a rotting orchard.
Wow. A rotting orchard.
Yeah. It is a systemic structural crisis woven into the actual blueprint of how higher education operates.
Okay, before we get any further into the weeds on that, I want to talk directly to you, the listener, because it is incredibly easy to hear the words academic department politics and just instantly tune out.
Sure, it sounds like inside baseball.
Right. You might be thinking, well, I don't work in the university. I'm not trying to get a PhD. So why does it matter to me if a chemistry professor is a jerk to his grad students?
But it matters to everyone.
Exactly. Society relies entirely on the output of this system. The medical research that might eventually save your life, the public policies governing your town, the climate models, the economic theories driving our markets, all of that knowledge comes from this specific academic pipeline.
And if the system producing that knowledge is toxic, we all suffer.
Right. If the most brilliant, innovative minds are being crushed or silenced or driven out of research entirely because they refuse to endure abuse, then the knowledge pipeline is fundamentally compromised. We are literally all paying the price for academia's refusal to protect its own people.
The stakes go far beyond human resources. We are talking about the integrity of human knowledge itself.
Yeah, that's a huge point.
When a system systematically drives out its top talent, we don't just lose their immediate intellectual contributions. We lose future scientific leadership. We basically degrade the foundation of societal progress. So true. But to truly understand how this happens, we have to look really closely at the mechanics of the abuse itself. Because the line between rigorous academic training and outright bullying is exactly where universities constantly try to hide.
Let's focus on that line, because this is where things get really murky for me. If we look at the culture of academia, isn't it supposed to be brutal?
Well, it's supposed to be rigorous.
Right, but a PhD program isn't a summer camp. You are there to have your ideas thrown against the wall to see if they break.
Absolutely.
So if a professor tells a student, your methodology is garbage, you need to rewrite this entire chapter, that might feel awful to a sensitive student. They might feel humiliated. But how does an institution police feelings.
That's the classic pushback.
Yeah, like how do we distinguish between a mentor who is just giving harsh, demanding, necessary peer review and a mentor who is actually an abuser?
That is the exact defense mechanism the system uses every single time. They say, we just have high standards.
Right, we're just tough.
But Dr. Westover brings in established organizational psychology to cut right through that defense. Rigorous intellectual critique is absolutely necessary. You want your ideas stress-tested.
Of course.
But workplace bullying operates on an entirely different axis. It is defined as repeated, health-harming mistreatment. The difference between a demanding mentor and a bully comes down to objective metrics, not just hurt feelings.
Okay, what are the metrics?
We are looking for 3 specific things: pattern, intent, and power differential.
So it's not just a professor snapping because they missed their morning coffee.
Far from it. Legitimate scholarly critique, even when it is delivered really harshly, focuses squarely on the work.
The work itself.
Yes. The intent, fundamentally, is to support the professional development of the scholar and improve the research outcome. Bullying, on the other hand, abandons the work and focuses on the person.
Oh, I see.
It is an attack on a person's character, their basic competence, and their fundamental sense of belonging in the academic community.
That's a huge distinction.
And crucially, it is not an isolated incident. It is a sustained pattern over time that creates a hostile environment. And that environment actively impairs the target's ability to even do the work they're being criticized for.
Because they're so stressed.
Exactly. The primary intent is not education. It is the demonstration of dominance and control.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's the difference between saying this data set is fundamentally flawed because you didn't control for X versus saying you are a fraud, you clearly don't have the intellectual capacity to be in this program, and I will make sure you never get a job.
Yes. One is attacking the data, the other is attacking the human being.
So what does this actually look like on a day-to-day basis in a university setting?
The manifestations are deeply specific to the academic environment. Yes, there is the overt verbal abuse and public humiliation.
Like yelling in a meeting.
Yeah, berating a student in front of an entire seminar room, just to make an example of them. But often it is far more insidious.
How so?
It involves arbitrary deadline changes, like telling a junior researcher on a Friday afternoon that a massive grant proposal draft is suddenly due Monday morning.
Just intentionally setting them up for failure.
Exactly. It also involves socially and professionally isolating targets, ensuring they are excluded from important department emails or lab meetings.
Wow, just icing them out.
Right. And then there is the outright exploitation of labor, where advisors demand unpaid work that has absolutely nothing to do with the student's academic progress.
Like what? Making them get coffee?
Or running personal errands or managing the professor's side business, all under the implicit threat of academic ruin.
And we touched on this in the opening scenario, but I want to go back to the idea of withholding authorship credit, because to someone outside the university system, fighting over whose name goes first on a paper sounds, I don't know, incredibly petty. Like, who cares?
It sounds petty until you realize how the industry works. In higher education, publication is the sole currency.
Publish or perish.
It is not an exaggeration. It is the literal rule of survival. If you are a graduate student or an early career researcher, you might spend 3 years doing the heavy lifting on a study.
Right.
You run the experiments at 2 in the morning, you gather and clean the data, you write the foundational drafts. If the senior faculty member then decides to remove your name from the final publication or moves you from first author down to 5th author behind people who did no work.
That's devastating.
It is. They haven't just hurt your feelings, they have stolen years of your career capital. When you go on the job market, you have an empty resume.
That is a profound mechanism of work sabotage.
Absolutely.
They're essentially stealing your future to inflate their own. And if this were happening to 1 or 2 people, it would be a tragedy. But the data Dr. Westover presents on how often this happens is just mind-blowing.
The prevalence is staggering.
What are the numbers?
The empirical research estimates that between 28% and 50% of all academic workers will experience workplace bullying during their careers.
Wait, up to 50%.
Up to 50%.
So if you look at a university department meeting with 20 people sitting around a table, statistically, up to 10 of them have been or currently are being abused in their workplace. That is a completely normalized crisis.
It is entirely normalized. And what's fascinating here is how the academic context complicates the identification of these behaviors, which is part of why the numbers are so high.
Right, it hides in plain sight.
Exactly, particularly for vulnerable groups. You brought up international students earlier in our deep dive.
Yeah, with the visa threat.
Dr. Westover emphasizes that international scholars often misinterpret harsh communication or unreasonable demands simply as cultural differences.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
They might think, well, maybe this extreme hierarchy is just how American or British or Canadian universities operate. They have no baseline for what is normal.
Right. They don't know the rules of the game yet, so they don't realize they're being cheated.
Yeah.
And they are completely trapped by that visa system.
The vulnerability is absolute. Their legal right to reside in the country is contingent upon their relationship with their advisor.
That's so much power for one person to have.
It is.
Yeah.
Advisors can, and routinely do, weaponize that visa dependency to extract excessive labor. The power differential there isn't just about getting a good grade, it's about deportation.
Wow.
But even beyond international students, consider early career faculty.
Okay.
These are brilliant people who finally landed a tenure-track job, but they have to navigate senior colleagues who hold the absolute keys to their future.
Because the senior folks vote on their tenure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are terrified to report anything, because the person they're reporting might be the exact person voting on their tenure in 3 years.
Which brings us to the core issue. If half of all academic workers are experiencing this, it physically cannot be a coincidence.
No, it can't.
It can't just be that universities magically attract a high percentage of sociopaths. There has to be something in the actual architecture of higher education that makes it the perfect petri dish for abuse.
Exactly. Dr. Westover argues that academia is uniquely vulnerable because of its structural blueprints.
Let's break that down.
The primary driver is extreme power concentration. The academic hierarchy creates a dynamic where a graduate student or even a junior faculty member depends on a single person for almost everything.
Single person.
Yes. A dissertation advisor controls degree completion, funding allocation, recommendation letters, and access to the wider professional network.
That's basically their whole career.
Right. They exercise unilateral authority over these career-determining resources, and traditionally, there is virtually no institutional oversight on how they wield that power.
When I was reading this part of the analysis, a very specific analogy hit me.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It doesn't sound like a modern educational institution. It sounds exactly like a medieval feudal system.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Think about it. The graduate student is the serf. They are tied to the land, which in this case is the lab or the department.
Right.
And the advisor is the feudal lord. The lord provides this serf with a little bit of funding, a desk, and permission to exist in that academic world. But in exchange, the serf's labor belongs entirely to the lord.
That fits perfectly.
Their entire professional survival depends on keeping the lord happy. And if the lord decides to become a tyrant, the serf has no king to appeal to. There is no independent HR department in a medieval fiefdom.
That analogy captures the structural entrapment beautifully. The serf is entirely dependent. And just as in feudalism, the lords themselves are protected by a system that makes them virtually untouchable.
Tenure.
Yes. In academia, that protection is called tenure.
Let's dig into tenure, because this is a legendary concept. The public perception of tenure is that once you get it, you basically have a job for life, and you can only be fired for committing a serious crime.
That's the general understanding, yes.
But the original idea behind it was noble, right? It was designed to protect academic freedom.
The foundational purpose of tenure is vital. It was designed so that a professor could research controversial topics or publish deeply unpopular findings without fear of being fired by an angry politician or a wealthy university donor.
To protect the truth.
Right. It is supposed to safeguard the pursuit of truth. But Dr. Westover's analysis points out a dark paradox. While tenure protects academic freedom, it also acts as an impenetrable shield for abusers.
How does it shield them?
Institutions struggle immensely to address misconduct by tenured faculty. It creates a state of de facto immunity.
So the shield that was built to protect truth-tellers is being used to protect tyrants.
Yes. The university bureaucracy becomes terrified of lawsuits if they try to discipline a tenured professor. So instead of intervening, they look the other way. And because of this immunity, repeat offenders can continue their abusive behaviors across entire decades. They leave generations of traumatized students in their wake, and the institution does nothing but quietly manage the fallout.
And it isn't just fear of lawsuits that keeps the university quiet, is it? The university actually financially benefits from these lords. This ties into what the research calls prestige hierarchies.
This is a critical piece of the architecture. Academic culture operates on a scarcity mindset within prestige hierarchies.
Meaning there's not enough to go around.
Exactly. Reputations, citations, institutional rankings, and above all else, grant money create a winner-take-all dynamic. Universities are desperate for federal research grants and prestige.
Right, that makes sense.
This leads to a dynamic where departments will explicitly tolerate severe abuse from a star researcher.
Because they bring in the cash.
Precisely. If a professor is bringing in $10 million a year in National Institutes of Health grants and publishing in Nature or Science, the administration will often turn a blind eye to the fact that their lab has a 100% turnover rate.
That is just wild.
Or that their graduate students are seeking psychiatric help. The institutional prestige and the financial windfall simply outweigh the human cost.
It's the brilliant jerk defense, but supercharged with multi-million-dollar federal grants.
Exactly.
And making this even worse is the physical and social isolation of the work itself. If you work in a corporate office, even a toxic one, there are usually people around. There are open floor plans, team meetings, witnesses. But academic work seems fundamentally isolating.
The isolation is a primary enabler, especially in the humanities or theoretical sciences. The work happens behind closed doors.
It's one-on-one.
Right. Advisement relationships are treated as highly private, almost sacred spaces with minimal transparency. A department often views the relationship between a faculty member and a student as absolutely none of their business.
Which is so dangerous.
It is. This privacy norm actively prevents peer intervention. If abuse happens in a closed office and no one else is in the room, it becomes a he said, she said situation. And the tenured star professor will always win that battle.
Always. Which brings us to perhaps the most insidious part of this entire system. When you have a feudal structure, protected by tenure, funded by prestige, and operating in secret,
Yeah.
it develops a culture to justify itself.
Oh, the cultural narrative is incredibly strong.
Right. How does academia convince itself that this is okay? Because these are supposed to be smart, self-aware people.
They do it through a deeply manipulative cultural narrative that normalizes suffering.
Explain that.
Well, what's fascinating here is how the academic world takes actual hazing and reframes it as rigor. It takes extreme exploitation, like working 80-hour weeks for poverty wages, and reframes it as paying your dues.
Right. I did it, so you have to do it.
Exactly. The senior faculty who run the departments went through the exact same gauntlet 30 years ago. They suffered under abusive advisors. But instead of wanting to break the cycle, they view it as a necessary initiation rite.
That is so messed up.
The mentality is, I survived it, it made me a brilliant scholar, so you must survive it too.
It turns structural abuse into a test of character. So if you complain, it means you just aren't smart enough or tough enough for the life of the mind.
Exactly. It's a brilliant silencer. If you report that you are being abused, the cultural narrative automatically invalidates you.
It flips it on the victim.
Yes, it tells the target that they simply lack resilience. It forces the victim to internalize the failure. And we have to look at who bears the brunt of this, because while the architecture affects everyone, it does not affect everyone equally.
Right. Vulnerability isn't distributed evenly.
Exactly. Vulnerability concentrates among those with the least institutional power.
Like who?
First-generation college students, for example. They often lack the inherited knowledge of professional academic norms.
Oh, that makes sense. If your parents didn't get PhDs, you don't know what's normal.
Right. If they enter a toxic lab, they might just assume, I guess this is how graduate school works. This is what my parents meant about working hard.
They just endure it.
Yes. Furthermore, the research clearly documents that women, people of color, and LGBTQ+ individuals experience disproportionate targeting.
Sadly, that tracks with broader society.
It does reflect broader societal patterns of marginalization, but in the isolated high-stakes silos of academia, baseline incivility rapidly escalates into systematic bullying. The system knows exactly who is least likely to be believed if they speak up.
So we have the blueprint of the crisis. We see how the feudal system is constructed, how tenure protects it, how prestige funds it, and how the culture justifies it.
The complete architecture.
Right. But what happens to the human being at the bottom of that structure? We can't just talk about this as an abstract HR problem. Let's look at the actual fallout. When someone is targeted by an academic bully, day in and day out, what happens to their mind and their body?
The human devastation is profound, and it manifests across psychological, physical, and professional dimensions.
Let's start with the psychological.
Psychologically, the research consistently documents severe impacts. Targets experience significantly elevated rates of major depression, severe anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicidal ideation.
That is heavy.
It is. Think about the psychological reality of the target. When a highly respected, wide-renowned advisor systematically undermines your confidence, you don't necessarily see the abusive dynamic at first.
Because they're the expert.
Exactly. You trust their expertise, so you internalize it. You genuinely believe you are an imposter, that
Yeah.
you are intellectually inadequate.
You think they are a genius, so if they say I'm worthless, I must actually be worthless.
Yes, that's exactly the thought process.
And living with that level of chronic stress, waking up every morning, terrified to check your email, terrified to walk into the lab that doesn't just stay in your head.
No, it destroys your physical health. When you are in an environment where you are constantly anticipating humiliation or attack, your body is bathed in cortisol.
This constant fight or flight mode.
You are in a permanent state of fight or flight. Over months and years, that sustained activation of the stress response system produces documented physical health consequences.
Like what kind of consequences?
We're talking about cardiovascular problems, significantly compromised immune functioning, severe gastrointestinal disorders, and chronic pain conditions. The targets of bullying report much higher rates of stress-related illness. The psychological trauma literally breaks down their bodily health.
And beyond the clinical diagnoses, there is a concept in Dr. Westover's analysis that I found utterly heartbreaking. He talks about the erosion of vocational identity.
Yes, that is a deeply painful part of this.
Because being a scientist or a historian or a philosopher, it usually isn't just a 9-to-5 job. It is a calling.
It is a core identity. For most people entering academia, scholarly work is tied to their deepest sense of purpose in the world.
Right, is who they are.
When academic bullying occurs, it isn't just a bad boss making your shift miserable. It is an attack on who you fundamentally are. Targets describe losing their passion entirely for fields they once loved.
They just burn out.
Worse than burnout. They experience a profound sense of betrayal by the institutions they trusted and a deep disillusionment with the very idea of a scholarly community. It is an existential harm.
You aren't just losing a paycheck. You are losing the person you thought you were going to be.
Exactly.
And as a result, they leave, which leads to the massive career and financial destruction.
The career disruption is absolute. Graduate students often abandon their degree programs after years of intense investment.
Just walking away from it all?
They walk away with staggering student loan debt and no credential to show for it.
Oh, that's brutal.
And if they do manage to grit their teeth and finish under an abusive advisor, they often emerge lacking the publications, the positive recommendation letters, and the professional networks required to actually secure a job in their highly competitive fields.
Because the bully sabotaged them.
Exactly. For early career faculty who are denied tenure because they were sabotaged by a hostile environment, they face forced geographic relocations.
Right. They have to move.
They have to uproot their families and move across the country for a mid-career restart, usually at a lower-tier institution, if they can find a job at all.
Okay, so that is the devastation for the individual. But here is the thing that baffles me. Even if we assume a university administration is completely cold and calculating and only cares about the bottom line, why do they let this continue?
That's the irony.
Dr. Westover points out that the institutions themselves are bleeding out because of this. What is the organizational cost?
The institutional costs are staggering, but universities have historically been terrible at calculating them. The most immediate impact is the degradation of research productivity and quality.
Well, yeah, stressed people don't work well.
Exactly. When you terrorize a researcher, their cognitive functioning and creativity are impaired. They publish less, they make more errors, and it takes longer to complete projects. But the most glaring organizational cost is the talent drain.
Brain drain.
Exactly. The Council of Graduate Schools estimates that doctoral attrition rates approach 50% in some disciplines.
Wait, 50%, half of the people who start leave.
Half of them. And climate factors, meaning toxic environments and abusive advisors, are a massive contributor to those departure decisions.
Imagine any other industry operating like that. If a tech company or a hospital lost 50% of its highly trained, specialized workforce because the management was so cruel,
they'd be out of business.
the board of directors would fire the entire leadership team immediately. The company would collapse.
It is an incredible waste of institutional investment in recruitment and training. And word spreads. Toxic departments become infamous within global scholarly networks.
People talk.
They absolutely do. Prospective top-tier graduate students and highly sought-after faculty increasingly factor departmental culture into their decisions on where to go.
So they avoid the toxic places.
Right. So institutions that tolerate bullying actively lose their competitive advantage in the global talent market. They literally cannot recruit the best minds because those minds do their research and know to avoid the trap.
And then there is the actual hard cash, the legal liabilities.
Massive financial burdens. Unchecked bullying generates hostile environment claims, discrimination lawsuits, and Title IX violations.
Which means lawsuits.
Yes. This translates to immense litigation costs, massive settlement payments, and intense regulatory scrutiny. Dr. Westover sets the University of Wisconsin system, which faced multi-million-dollar settlements related to faculty harassment cases.
Multi-million-dollar settlement.
And the great tragedy is that proactive, early intervention could have prevented both the horrific trauma to the victims and the massive financial drain on the university.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to the person listening right now who works in accounting or retail or tech, this is where the ripple effect hits society. It isn't just about delayed medical research. It directly degrades the education of the next generation.
Absolutely. Think about the classroom impact. Faculty who are experiencing workplace bullying deliver lower quality teaching.
Because they're exhausted.
The chronic stress impairs their preparation, their availability to mentor students, and their presence in the lecture hall.
Right.
Furthermore, graduate teaching assistants who are being bullied by their supervisors carry that trauma and exhaustion right into the undergraduate classrooms they teach.
Wow, they just pass the stress down the line.
Exactly. The resulting degradation in instructional quality directly affects undergraduate learning outcomes. The foundational measure of a university's success educating students is actively undermined by its refusal to manage its toxic culture.
So the diagnosis is undeniable. The feudal structure enables the abuse, the human toll is horrific, the universities are bleeding talent and money, and society is getting shortchanged on research and education. The system is fundamentally broken.
It is broken.
So, how do we fix it? How do you rewire a centuries-old institution to actually protect its people and its mission?
It's not easy, but the solutions do exist.
The first step, Dr. Westover outlines, is breaking the silence. We have to dismantle the isolation that allows abuse to thrive behind closed doors. And that starts with looking at how reporting systems currently fail. Why doesn't a bullied grad student just go to HR?
Because in traditional academic structures, the reporting mechanisms are designed to route complaints directly through the very power structures that are implicated in the abuse.
So wait, how does that work?
If a graduate student is being bullied by a senior professor, the standard university procedure usually dictates that they report it to the department chair.
But the department chair is probably the abuser's peer. I mean, they might have co-authored papers together. They might play golf on weekends.
Exactly. The chair is heavily incentivized to protect their colleague and protect the department's reputation.
That's a huge conflict of interest.
There are rarely strong confidentiality protections, and the process places an impossible psychological burden on someone who is already experiencing trauma. It is asking the victim to navigate a political minefield just to be heard.
Going back to our analogy, it is like telling the serf, if you have a problem with the Lord, just go complain to the Lord's best friend. I'm sure he'll be objective.
Exactly.
It is structurally designed to fail. So what is the alternative? How do we build a system that actually listens?
The key is structural independence. Dr. Westover highlights the University of British Columbia as a prime example of getting this right. They established an ombudsperson office.
Explain how an ombudsperson works in this context, just for someone who hasn't encountered one.
Think of an ombudsperson as the university's independent Supreme Court. Crucially, they have guaranteed independence from the academic administration.
So they don't answer to the deans?
No, they do not report to the department chairs or even the deans. They often report directly to the highest governing board of the university.
Oh, wow.
This office has the authority to receive complaints, maintain strict confidentiality, and launch investigations without needing permission from the department where the abuse is happening. It completely bypasses the localized power dynamics.
That is massive. You extract the investigation from the political web of the department.
Yes, that's step one.
But you also need different types of reporting, right? Because if I am a first-year grad student, I might not be ready to launch a massive, formal Supreme Court investigation on day one. I might just want someone to know what's happening.
Precisely. You need multiple tiered reporting options that accommodate varying levels of comfort and risk tolerance.
Like what?
The University of Michigan provides a great model here. They created parallel reporting channels. A target can go to an equity office, the ombudsperson, or a dedicated faculty senate committee.
Okay, giving them options.
And they offer different levels of action. There's anonymous reporting simply to help the university identify patterns. There are informal consultations where a person can get advice on how to handle a situation without triggering an automatic formal investigation.
Oh, that's smart.
And of course, formal complaint processes for when they are ready to seek direct accountability.
I really love that concept of anonymous reporting for pattern identification. Because if an independent office receives 3 anonymous notes over 2 years saying, Professor Smith's lab is a toxic nightmare, they can see the smoke before the whole building burns down. They can intervene proactively.
That proactive approach is the ultimate goal. Instead of waiting for a catastrophic crisis or a lawsuit, leading institutions use aggregated data to spot trouble early.
Right.
But none of this reporting infrastructure matters without strict, ironclad enforcement against retaliation.
Right, because if you get punished for reporting, no one will do it.
Exactly. The University of California system implemented major reforms following highly publicized harassment cases. They established centralized tracking, made it mandatory for supervisors to report concerning behavior, used outside independent investigators, and crucially, they enforced serious consequences for retaliatory conduct.
How do they protect the students?
They structurally separated employment decision authority from the individuals named in reports.
What does that mean?
So, if you file a report against your advisor, that advisor is legally and structurally blocked from having any say in your future performance evaluations, your funding, or your degree progress.
Oh, wow. You completely remove the weapon from their hand.
Exactly.
That makes reporting actually survivable. But reporting is still fundamentally after the fact. It relies on the victim taking on the burden of action. What about the people watching this happen in real time?
The bystanders.
Right, because as we established, this isn't just happening in dark alleys. It happens in seminars, in lab meetings, in faculty lounges. There are witnesses.
This brings us to one of the most vital cultural shifts: bystander intervention.
Okay.
Most workplace bullying occurs within a social context. When colleagues witness harmful behavior and stay silent, they aren't just being neutral.
What are they doing?
Their silence acts as a powerful signal of tolerance. It validates the abuser's behavior, and it completely, devastatingly isolates the target, reinforcing their belief that no one cares and nothing can be done.
That's a great point. Silence is complicity.
Dr. Westover emphasizes that transforming these passive witnesses into active allies through specialized bystander intervention training is one of the fastest ways to change a departmental culture.
The source material focuses heavily on the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and their specific bystander intervention program. How does it actually work in an academic setting?
The MIT program is brilliant because it focuses specifically on the unique power dynamics of academia. The first pillar is situational awareness.
Meaning just noticing it.
More than that. Many academics fail to intervene simply because they have been conditioned not to recognize the behavior as bullying. They might watch a professor tear a student to shreds and think, well, that's just rigorous intellectual debate.
Right, they excuse it.
So the training teaches pattern recognition, forces awareness of power differentials, and teaches participants how to assess the emotional impact of the behavior. They learn to clearly, objectively distinguish between a tough critique of a data set and a personal attack designed to humiliate.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting for me, but also where I am highly skeptical.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's play out a scenario. I am a 30-year-old assistant professor. I do not have tenure. I am sitting in a department meeting, and a tenured star researcher, a guy who brings in $20 million in grants and sits on the committee that will decide my tenure in 2 years, starts brutally, personally humiliating a graduate student in front of everyone.
A very real scenario.
Right. If I stand up and call him out, I am torching my own career. I am committing professional suicide. How does MIT's program actually get people to act in the face of that extreme power dynamic?
That fear of retaliation is the exact barrier the program is designed to overcome. And it does so by teaching that intervention does not always have to be a loud, confrontational showdown.
It doesn't.
No. They provide practical, scalable intervention strategies that match varying comfort levels and risk profiles.
Give me an example.
Yes, there is the direct challenge, where you might interject calmly and say, that comment seems overly personal rather than focused on the methodology.
which is terrifying.
Exactly. That takes immense capital. But if that is too risky, there is distraction and redirection. You interrupt the dynamic by saying, before we move on, let's take a step back and look at the control variables in this chart. You break the momentum of the abuse.
Oh, so you just derail the conversation to stop the attack.
Yes. And perhaps most importantly, there is the private follow-up.
What's that?
Approaching the target immediately after the meeting, behind closed doors, and saying, I saw what happened in there, it was completely unacceptable, and you did not deserve it. How can I support you?
Wow. Just validating their reality, breaking that psychological isolation so they don't go home thinking they are crazy.
Exactly. It prevents the internalization of the abuse. And the MIT program relies heavily on role-playing to teach this.
Role-playing, like acting it out.
Yes. They use scenario practice to help participants overcome the physiological freeze response. When you practice these micro-interventions in a low-stakes environment, you build muscle memory. You build the confidence that makes real-world intervention much more likely.
It's about changing the baseline expectation of the room.
Precisely. The ultimate goal of the MIT model is to create collective responsibility. If an entire department undergoes this training, the cultural expectation shifts.
Right. You're not alone anymore.
Speaking up is no longer viewed as an act of extraordinary, rebellious courage by a lone hero. It simply becomes the standard, expected professional norm. It shifts the group dynamic from passive tolerance to active mutual support.
Does it actually work?
MIT faculty who went through this actually reported a significantly increased willingness to intervene and greater confidence in holding their peers accountable.
That is incredibly hopeful. It gives people a toolkit. But I have to push back again.
Go for it.
Bystander intervention is only sustainable if the university leadership actually backs it up.
Bingo.
If I use my toolkit and I intervene and the department reports the bully, but the dean does nothing and the bully keeps their job and their power, eventually the bystanders will just stop trying. Exhaustion and cynicism will take over. We have to fundamentally alter how leaders are evaluated, and we have to break up the actual concentration of power. Let's look at reclaiming the ranks. How do we hold the feudal lords accountable?
It starts by completely overhauling what leaders are evaluated on. Historically, a department chair is judged almost entirely on output.
Right, research publications, faculty recruitment, grant money.
Exactly. If the department is highly ranked and heavily funded, the chair is deemed a wild success, regardless of the body count in the labs. Dr. Westover points out that institutional tolerance for bullying is fundamentally a failure of leadership. Leaders must be explicitly evaluated on cultural outcomes.
What does that look like in practice? Because a toxic chair is just going to tell the dean, everything is great, my department is perfectly happy. Stanford University completely overhauled this, right?
Yes, Stanford is a leading example here. They realized their department chairs were neglecting interpersonal dynamics because they weren't being graded on them.
So what do they do?
Stanford instituted a new framework that requires evidence of mentoring effectiveness, equitable resource distribution, conflict resolution capability, and the active fostering of an inclusive culture.
Wow.
A chair's annual review now examines their cultural stewardship just as rigorously as their grant acquisitions.
But how do they measure that cultural stewardship? Because again, the chair will just lie.
That is where the methodology changes. Traditional academic evaluation only looks upward. Students evaluate faculty, faculty evaluate chairs, chairs report to deans.
Right.
Stanford and other progressive institutions implemented regular 360-degree confidential feedback.
Oh, 360-degree reviews.
Yes. This means comprehensive assessment requires downward feedback. They use confidential surveys that allow graduate students, postdocs, and junior faculty to anonymously rate their supervisor's mentoring quality, their respectfulness, and their accessibility.
That is brilliant. It gives a voice to the serfs. It lets the people at the bottom report on the reality of the Lord without fear of retribution. But what happens when that 360-degree review comes back, and it turns out the chair is actually running a toxic nightmare?
There have to be hard consequences. The most progressive institutions are now removing administrative appointments from individuals who create toxic climates, absolutely regardless of their research accomplishments.
Oh, they actually strip them of power.
Yes. If a department chair ignores bullying complaints, or if they themselves retaliate against reporters, they are stripped of their leadership role. For persistent offenders, institutions are restricting their research privileges and, crucially, cutting off their access to new graduate students.
They cut off the supply of vulnerable labor. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It hits them where it hurts.
But it shouldn't just be punitive, right? If we want the
Yeah.
culture to change, we should also reward the people who are doing it well.
Exactly. Effective systems use positive incentives to recognize cultural contributions. Teaching and mentoring awards must explicitly factor in a professor's impact on student well-being.
Reward the good mentors.
Right.
When it comes to the holy grail promotion and tenure, the criteria must include concrete evidence that the faculty member fosters a healthy, inclusive environment.
That would change everything.
Some institutions go further, offering course releases, meaning you have to teach fewer classes, or providing extra internal research funding to faculty who invest significant effort in cultural improvement initiatives. You make good behavior structurally and financially rewarding.
Okay, so that addresses the leadership layer. We evaluate chairs on culture, we use 360 reviews, we punish the bad and reward the good. But we still have the core structural problem we identified at the very beginning.
The one-on-one dynamic.
Yes, the one-on-one advisor-advisee relationship, that concentrated point of failure where one person holds all the keys. How do we reform the actual advisement structure to distribute that power?
Dr. Westover highlights the University of Michigan's Rackham Graduate School model as the blueprint for this structural reform. They recognize that the traditional one-on-one model forces students into impossible choices if abuse occurs.
So what do they change? So Rackham instituted mandatory committee oversight from the very first year of a student's program.
Wait, normally a dissertation committee doesn't form until a student is doing their final proposal, which is like 3 or 4 years into the program, right?
Exactly. And by that point, the student is completely financially and professionally entangled with their single advisor.
Trapped.
Right. By establishing the committee in year one, the student immediately has multiple faculty relationships, diverse perspectives on their work, and collective oversight. It completely breaks the one-on-one monopoly.
That makes a lot of sense.
If the primary advisor starts exhibiting toxic behavior, the student already has established formal relationships with other senior committee members they can turn to for protection and guidance.
This reminds me of diversifying a financial portfolio to mitigate risk.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
If you put your entire life savings into one single stock, which is the old model of having just one advisor, and that stock crashes, or in this case, that advisor turns out to be abusive, you are totally bankrupt. Your career is gone.
Right.
But by spreading the advisement across a committee in year one, you are diversifying the risk. A single toxic advisor can no longer bankrupt the student's entire future.
That is a perfect analogy. You are distributing the risk, and by doing so, you are distributing the power. Another crucial structural reform is creating formal, streamlined procedures to change advisors without penalty.
Because right now, it's hard to switch, isn't it?
In many traditional programs, changing an advisor is practically impossible. It means starting your research over from scratch, losing your lab access, losing your funding, and extending your graduation timeline by years.
That's a trap.
It is a form of financial and professional coercion that traps students in abusive relationships. Progressive policies allow students to change advisors for any reason, without negative consequences to their timeline, and with guaranteed continuous bridge funding from the department.
That is true freedom.
Yeah.
The ability to just walk away from abuse without destroying the life you've built.
And some highly innovative programs take it even further. They implement team mentoring, where a student has 2 co-advisors. They use rotating advisors in the early years so students can test compatibility before committing.
I love that.
And profoundly, they separate evaluation from mentoring.
Separating the mentor from the evaluator, how does that even work?
Under this model, the assigned mentor provides guidance, coaching, emotional support, and scientific advice. But they do not control the evaluation decisions regarding the student's progression.
Who does?
An independent committee assesses the student's progress based on defined, objective milestones. It drastically reduces the mentor's power to arbitrarily determine outcomes or use grades as a weapon.
It separates the coach from the referee. That is incredible. The mentor can just focus on helping you improve without holding a sword over your head.
Exactly. And the final piece of this structural reform is inclusion in governance.
Meaning letting the students have a say.
Yes. Putting graduate student representatives on faculty meeting agendas, on curriculum committees, and on climate committees gives a direct voice to the most vulnerable population in the room.
That seems so obvious, but I bet it rarely happens.
It surfaces hidden concerns and demonstrates a real institutional commitment to shared governance. Following these reforms, the University of Michigan saw significantly increased student satisfaction and a much greater willingness to report concerning behavior early before it escalated.
So we have the blueprint. We know independent ombudspersons work. We know bystander intervention works. We know 360-degree evaluations and committee-based advisement work.
The tools are all there.
But here is my biggest concern with all of this. Policy changes and new structures look great in a PDF on the university website. But universities are ancient, deeply entrenched bureaucratic institutions.
Very entrenched.
How does an institution ensure these changes actually stick? How do we prevent this from just being a passing administrative fad where everyone sits through a workshop for a year, checks a box, and then goes right back to the old toxic ways?
That's the real challenge.
This leads us to our final discussion, the long game, building an ethical infrastructure that actually lasts.
Sustainable reform cannot just rely on a new policy manual. It requires changing the underlying cultural assumptions of the institution. It requires building long-term organizational resilience.
What's the foundation of that?
The foundation of that resilience is a psychological concept called psychological safety. Dr. Westover references the pioneering research of Harvard's Amy Edmondson on this topic.
Psychological safety.
Yes, it is defined as the shared belief that one can speak up, take risks, ask questions, and make mistakes without fear of punishment, humiliation, or retaliation.
So feeling safe to be human.
Right. Edmondson's research shows that this safety isn't just about making people feel good. It is actually the core predictor of organizational learning, innovation, and high performance across all sectors, from hospitals to tech companies to universities.
Because if you are terrified of your boss, you aren't going to propose a wild, innovative new idea. You aren't going to point out a flaw in the data. You are going to play it as safe as possible just to survive the day.
Exactly. You hide your mistakes, you don't ask clarifying questions, and intellectual innovation dies.
So how do you build that in academia?
In academia, building psychological safety requires leadership communication to explicitly reframe the idea of rigor. University presidents, deans, and department chairs must consistently articulate that demanding scholarship and respectful treatment are complementary.
They aren't mutually exclusive.
Right. They have to publicly, repeatedly reject the old narrative that psychological safety lowers academic standards. They need to emphasize that psychological safety is what actually enables excellence.
It is about changing the vocabulary of the institution. It is not soft to treat people with dignity. It is optimal for scientific and academic performance.
The University of Toronto undertook a massive culture change initiative based precisely on this. They conducted regular, comprehensive climate assessments, and crucially, they made the reporting transparent and public.
Public reporting.
Yes. When they found problems, they didn't hide the bad results to protect the university's prestige. They published them.
That takes guts.
They publicly tracked whether their interventions were actually working year over year. And they actively addressed the underlying systemic inequities that make marginalized groups more vulnerable to bullying in the first place.
Transparency is the ultimate disinfectant. But there is another concept in Dr. Westover's analysis regarding the long game that I find absolutely fascinating.
Oh, the aviation model.
Yes. He says academic institutions need to apply their own research to themselves, specifically by adopting the continuous learning models used in high-reliability organizations. He mentions healthcare and aviation. Now, help me out here. How does a centuries-old university actually operate like an airline when it comes to safety?
It is a brilliant and highly applicable comparison. High-reliability organizations like commercial aviation or surgical teams operate in environments where mistakes can be immediately fatal.
Right.
To prevent disasters, they have implemented systems that systematically investigate failures and, crucially, near misses.
Near misses. So if something almost goes wrong.
Yes. If a pilot makes an error that almost causes a crash, but disaster is averted, the airline doesn't immediately fire the pilot and cover up the incident to protect the airline's reputation.
Right, because if they do that, every other pilot in the company will just hide their mistakes out of fear,
Yeah.
and eventually a plane will actually fall out of the sky.
Exactly. The secrecy creates danger. Instead, aviation conducts a blameless after-action review.
Blameless.
Yes. They ask systemic questions. What allowed this situation to develop? Were they fatigued? Was the dashboard confusing? What warning signs were missed?
Looking at the whole picture.
Exactly. How did the system fail the pilot, and how can we redesign the system to prevent any pilot from making that mistake again? The focus is entirely on organizational learning, not individual punishment.
So how does that apply to a university?
Dr. Westover argues that academia needs to apply this exact approach to bullying incidents and culture failures. Currently, when a severe bullying incident occurs or a toxic environment is finally exposed to the press, the university's instinct is usually crisis management.
quietly settle the lawsuit.
Right. Quietly settle the lawsuit, force the abuser into early retirement, hide the details, and protect the institutional prestige at all costs.
Sweep it under the rug.
The aviation model demands the exact opposite. It demands that the institution investigates the incident as a system failure. They need to ask, why did the reporting mechanisms fail to catch this 3 years ago?
Right.
Why did bystanders in the department feel they couldn't intervene? What structural changes to advisement or funding are needed to prevent this? They turn a crisis into a public opportunity to build resilience.
That is a profound shift in mindset. From protecting the brand to fixing the machine. And keeping that machine fixed requires ongoing maintenance, doesn't it?
It does. You can't just fix it once. It requires additional structural safeguards like distributed authority, using term limits for department chairs so that power doesn't become permanently entrenched in one person.
Oh, that makes sense. Term limits.
It also requires external accountability, like bringing in alumni networks, industry partners, and advisory boards to provide oversight that internal people might be too afraid or too biased to impose.
Get outside eyes on the problem.
And fundamentally, it requires universities to put their money where their mouth is. They need to actually hire full-time internal experts dedicated to organizational culture and conflict resolution.
Not just a one-off seminar.
Right, rather than just bringing in an external consultant for a 3-day workshop once every 5 years, it has to become an ongoing, embedded part of the institutional memory.
The long game. It really is about treating the health of the culture with the exact same rigor, the exact same funding, and the exact same seriousness that the university applies to its research output and its financial endowment.
Precisely. The knowledge of how to fix this exists right now. The research is clear. The organizational psychology is settled.
We have the answers.
We do. The evidence-based solutions from ombudspersons to committee advisement to aviation-style postmortems, they are all available. The only question remaining is whether academic institutions have the collective institutional will to implement them.
So let's bring this all together. We started today by looking at this beautiful cinematic ideal of the university as a place of truth, collaboration, and light.
The ivory tower.
And we confronted the dark paradox hiding inside it, the hidden crisis of academic bullying. We have unpacked how a feudal system of concentrated power, protected by the shield of tenure, fueled by a desperate prestige economy, and justified by a twisted culture of rigor, has allowed unto half of all academic workers to experience abuse.
It's a heavy realization.
It really is. We have explored the devastating human cost, the ruined careers, the shattered physical and mental health, the heartbreaking loss of vocational identity. And we have seen how institutions are actively bleeding global talent and massive amounts of money as a result of their own inaction.
But there is a way forward.
Right. More importantly, we haven't just admired the problem. We have walked through the concrete roadmap for reform. We have seen how independent reporting channels bypass departmental politics.
Yeah.
We have seen how active bystander intervention changes the baseline culture of a room. We have seen how 360-degree leadership evaluations and committee-based advisement in year one can dismantle that feudal structure and distribute power.
It's entirely possible to fix.
We have seen that academic excellence and human dignity are complementary, not competing values. You can have incredibly high standards. You can push the boundaries of human knowledge without having, without humiliation, and without abuse. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means that when these vital institutions treat their internal culture with systematic rigor, the benefits ripple out to all of us.
It affects everyone.
It means faster medical breakthroughs because brilliant postdocs aren't quitting science in despair. It means better undergraduate teaching because faculty aren't operating in a state of chronic trauma. It means the knowledge that shapes our world, our policies, and our future is being produced in an environment of true intellectual freedom, not fear. The blueprint for a better academic world exists. It just requires the courage to actually build it.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one lingering question to ponder, something that builds on everything we have explored today. We rely on universities to solve the most complex existential problems in our society. But if the very institutions designed to teach us how to think critically, how to act ethically, and how to govern fairly have been failing this fundamentally at managing their own internal power structures, how does that change the way you view the expert research, the policies, and the knowledge they produce for the rest of society?
A profound question to leave us on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will see you next time.